viewers, and welcome to the Liberty Mike podcast, broadcasting from an undisclosed location in the heart of Dixie. I am Michael, and I am here with Liberty Larry.
How's it going?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Pretty good.
Yeah? Not complaining about the weather this week? I thought there was surely...
Well, I'm not happy about the weather this week. I'll say that. But
I think it's been nice. Sun's been out. It's cold.
It's too cold. It's too cold.
Sun's been out. If I had weather alerts set up, I'm pretty sure I would have gotten a freeze warning last night.
Yeah. It froze. It froze pretty good last night.
Yeah.
I think it did the night before too.
Yeah, I don't use a lot of heat in the house. More than you.
I was going to say, we don't use heat in the house.
Yeah. But I got home from work today and I had a chocolate chip cookie.
Yeah. Was it frozen?
Yeah, pretty much. It snapped instead of.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was
peeled apart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's still tasty though.
Yeah. Even if you had to crunch it.
Yeah, man, it's a Fresh Market chocolate chip cookie.
Oh, those are solid.
Yeah. So I did the mail run for my office today, which usually I do on Mondays. But I had issues with my dryer and all that stuff, so I had to be here
You're off schedule.
For electricians and what have you. And so I traded out for today. Man, was that a mistake. What a complete waste of time that was.
Oh, the mail didn't run today.
Yeah, because I had no idea that the post office was going to be closed for a one-term bad president.
Now you're sounding like me.
And I was driving over there. I was driving across the bay, and I saw that out in front of Battleship Parkway, they had the flags at half-mast. And I was like, why do they have the flags at half-mast? What's going on today?
Yeah.
And then I got to the post office, and the doors were locked. I mean, I could get to the boxes, but there was nothing in them. It was a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
I was very frustrated. And I thought, I haven't really watched any of the coverage of this, but I suspect, and I talked to my mom just before we started recording tonight, and she kind of confirmed it.
Yeah.
But
I've watched a little coverage, not a lot though.
Well, up until now, Jimmy Carter has been kind of recognized by both political parties as a bad president.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I bet since he died, he's suddenly become...
Oh, they have to canonize him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to...
Lionized, bunch of hagiographies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in his defense, his presidency was pretty terrible. I think everybody pretty well renownedly admits that. A lot of the canonizing that I've seen has been his post-president work.
Yeah.
A lot of the organizations that he done work.
Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah, stuff like that. And I think that's fair. I mean, I'm not one to be too critical of the dead, and I feel like that's just bad form. John McCain is a very stark exception to that rule.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But
I read a speech that he gave, I think at UGA, or it may have been in Atlanta somewhere, before he was a candidate for presidency.
Yeah.
Well, he was, I guess, governor of Georgia.
Yeah. I didn't know he was governor of Georgia.
I think he held that position.
It may be right. I don't know.
I thought it was, and then Mom said something about, well, wasn't he governor of Georgia? And I hadn't even mentioned it to her. So since she thought it and I thought it, it's probably is correct. I didn't verify it, so if we're wrong.
Oh, well.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to know, because I'm not going to check it either, but because I don't think it's worth checking. But I read a speech that he gave before his presidential candidacy that was great. Yep. I mean, I don't remember a whole lot about it now. I think I still have it, though, a PDF on my computer.
Yeah.
That was just very far-seeing and thoughtful and hopeful.
Yeah.
This is really good.
Yeah.
It seems to me, and I don't know enough about this just right now, maybe by next week, to speak on it authoritatively, but it seems to me that the real problem that he had was that he, like many people on the left, has no comprehension of economics.
Yeah. can be a problem, especially when you're going to hold that position.
I mean, I don't hold the Iran thing against him because that's the result of policies that way predated him.
Yeah.
May not have been handled the best, but like the antagonism was.
Yeah, that
was
on.
before.
Yeah.
Was 20 years before Carter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard to hold him responsible for that exactly, but I don't know. I just I find it interesting that when these people pass away, that they suddenly become way more effective in everybody's mind.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't hurt that he is no longer the worst president of my lifetime, because we just had the worst president of my lifetime.
Oh, I just assumed that you meant Trump, because on all the lists that are put out by the academics, Trump is the worst president ever. Wow. Somehow.
Yeah, no, it's always been Carter till Biden. Like Biden overtook that. So
yeah,
and I feel like it
wasn't even your lifetime.
Way. Yeah, I guess I was born in '82, so I guess Reagan was
gone.
Yeah, fair enough.
My lifetime.
Okay. The worst president of Mike's lifetime.
Yeah. I think Biden takes that pretty handily. I don't know. You could make a case for George W. Bush.
You absolutely can. I didn't consider Bush, but yeah, there's a strong case for that.
Although, in which case, I guess you'd really be talking about Dick Cheney.
Yeah, right. Pretty much, yeah.
So I got it mixed up. I don't think we talked about it on the podcast anyway, but the Presidential Freedom Award or whatever, Freedom Medal, is that it?
Medal of Freedom.
Medal of Freedom, there you go. Yeah. Was given out just recently. There's some weird people on that list. I thought Liz Cheney was on that list also, but she got a lesser award that was the Presidential Citizenship Award or something like that.
Yeah.
For her brave work on the January 6th committee.
Oh, yeah.
I think is the primary reason.
Yeah, a lot of bravery going on that committee.
Yeah. Right. And we just had the January 6th anniversary.
I watched.
I don't understand why we didn't have a national day of mourning.
Well, because they have to do the job. Like January 6th is the day you do the officiating of the ballots and whatnot.
Yeah, well, man, missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Because, we still talk about Pearl Harbor and 9/11.
Yeah.
They're like national. I guess that we're not really doing a national day of mourning for Pearl Harbor at this point, but we still do 9/11, right?
Oh yeah, 9/11's always a big one.
So since it was worse than both of those, I thought that there would be.
It's funny how that's just kind of wore off. Like, that they tried to push it so hard, but it's when something's not organic like that, we're like, everybody felt the same way about 9/11 after it happened, and anybody who lived through it kind of feels the same way about it today.
Yeah.
Like, it was a horrible thing. January 6th just didn't hold up.
Yeah, it's hard to maintain that kind of inane fantasy.
Exactly.
I don't know. I had some real serious arguments with some family members about the seriousness of January 6th.
Yeah.
And, of course, the case I made at the time is that the vast majority of people were just tourists or LARPers.
Yeah.
They were just there being part of an event. They weren't. The idea that there was an attempt, and especially any kind of possibility of overthrowing the U.S. government with a couple hundred unarmed people.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Man, if only it was so easy.
Yeah, seriously. Oh, man. I guess, so now we have confirmation that there were more than a dozen informants in the crowd.
Yep.
And my first thought of that is, first off, they've been denying all that. Well, not exactly denying, but refusing to acknowledge
confirm or deny. Yeah.
All this time. I think we all knew. But then I started thinking, well, if they had all these informants in the crowd, and it was such a terrible event that almost toppled our government,
right.
How is it that they weren't able to prevent that?
Exactly. And then you start thinking, well, if they knew this was coming, they had all these informants, maybe maybe what happened was kind of the plan.
Well, sure, but even without that, like maybe they should have brought in more law enforcement or.
Well, I mean, Trump and Pelosi are on record like they were trying to do, like there were powers that be, like Trump's powers be, were trying to do that.
Yeah.
And was shut down. So I don't know. It feels so much just like an inside job, man. Like I hate to use that term, but it is what it is. Like that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, I would like to see more footage.
I didn't, like I say, I mean, I don't know. You know, Tucker Carlson had all of that and played a bunch of it on his show, but I don't think
that's the last time it's been played, right?
Played much.
No.
I mean, he didn't.
I mean, he really he released a bunch of footage related to the MAGA shaman.
The shaman, yeah. But I don't think he released everything. I don't think he ever released everything he had.
No, he could. Well, he only got to play it like 1 or 2 nights, and he was fired not long after that, right?
Which I never really got an answer to what happened to all of that footage. Like, does Fox have that or does Tucker have that? And if Tucker has it, why didn't he just release it all? He don't have to play it all on his show. He could just release it all to the public.
Yeah, it has to be in the hands of Fox at this point. I feel like Tucker would have
done
played
that.
more.
Yeah,
by now. I don't know. I don't know. I have some questions about him anyway, but
yeah. I mean, for the most part, I like him. I don't trust him. Like I don't trust him like I trust other personalities. I'll say that.
Yeah.
But I like him. Like I feel like his, for the most part, his heart's in the right place.
You got really quiet there.
Oh, my bad.
I guess you didn't want to really be on record saying that. That's
yeah. I mean, I think for the most part that's true. Like I say, I mean, I don't trust him. Like I don't trust him like I trust a lot of people.
He was a part of establishment media for a very long time.
Yeah.
But he's also been somebody who's come out and said that he made mistakes about some really important,
which is more than
state-sponsored issues.
Yeah,
so.
which is more than any of those other guys will do.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like Tucker's out there saying, like, I was wrong about Iraq. Like, I sold this war that I shouldn't have tried to sell, and like that sort of thing. And none of these other guys are doing that.
Yeah,
that were around at that time. None of the other congressmen and women, by the way, will do that either, that voted for it. And they all know it was wrong now, but they still stand by it.
Yeah. I did want to talk a little bit about Vivek's comments that were, I guess they were given in the context of the H-1B visa debate that was going on.
Yeah.
I don't really care that much about that. I mean, we can talk about that a little bit too. I
don't have a hardened opinion on that really one way or the other.
Yeah, they said on No Agenda, I think it was on No Agenda, calling them out.
Yeah.
Love that show.
Yeah.
Let me make that clear. But, oh no, maybe it wasn't. I think it was, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it might have been on Part of the Problem.
Oh, yeah.
Where they were saying that there are tax breaks for employers of H-1B.
Yeah, they talked about,
recipients.
I'm pretty sure that was part of the problem. And I've heard that in other places too, but I haven't confirmed.
I can find no evidence of that. I can't find any evidence of employers getting tax breaks for H-1B visas that they can't, holders that they can't get for other employees too.
I mean, that may be true, but I've definitely heard that in other places. Beyond.
Yeah, I'm thinking that that's like a propagandistic talking point at this point.
It might be, but I mean, I don't know. Like I say,
Yeah.
I haven't went digging, so.
I mean, there are certainly problems with the H-1B visa program. Mostly, I think the problem is that the way it's done, it's like a modern day. Indentured labor kind of
oh really
thing. Yeah, just because you're if you come over on an H-1B, you're coming over to work for a specific company. You can't, so you can potentially lose your visa status if you try and go work for somebody else.
Okay.
So you're kind of trapped in the company that you're working for. You can't take a better offer somewhere else, or you may just get sent back home,
Yeah.
So it creates this kind of situation where they have to work out their time for a specific employer at a specific rate,
And that's a problem. And because that company also knows that they can treat that employee like absolute crap.
Yeah.
And there really ain't much they can do about it.
Yeah, you want to go back to India?
You want to go back home?
Yeah.
So,
which is obviously, and it's good for
the employers do that kind of crap.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they can pay them less than they can pay an American. But, at least according to a bunch of the techies, Americans aren't seeking those jobs.
Yeah.
Or there aren't enough qualified Americans to do those jobs.
Well, that's kind of was my more of my understanding is like we just don't. People here aren't that interested in learning that stuff and taking those jobs over. Now, and I think Robbie talked about this on Part of the Problem, but I'm with him that, well, if you like set up schools, like if we have this need, like if you set up training programs in schools to do some of this, you'd find Americans to do those jobs, I would imagine.
Well, I would like to see a lot more employers generally set up essentially like training schools or apprenticeship programs or that kind of thing. I think that's a hell of a lot more valuable than university system at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
But that's not what's promoted.
Yeah,
and because the university system at this point is a good way of bribing for votes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it works the same way as your standard school does. It's a good indoctrination camp.
Yeah.
I mean, and like the government doesn't want to do away with that. Like they get an extra 4 years to suck you in.
Yeah. I mean, my mom was saying, well, we're bringing in people from countries that hate us. And I said, so what?
Yeah.
It was kind of my response. I understand where she's coming from. She's saying, well, Iranians or Syrians or Chinese or whatever that are coming over here on these programs.
Or building sleeper cells.
Well, no. Her point was that presumably their countries expect something. Like that they got permission from their government to come over here and do this stuff, and there's probably some kind of quid pro quo.
Yeah.
And I get that, but the thing is that like nations don't represent their people. Yeah. I think that we're a clear example of that. Like the United States is a clear example of that.
Yeah.
What our government does around the world does not reflect the views and opinions of the American public on the whole.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah, and you can look at the elections and see that.
Yeah. Or independent polling on a bunch of the stuff that the government does. And the fact that they don't actually let us vote on anything of any real substance that they do.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why every candidate always runs on the anti-war platform, or not every candidate. The winning candidates usually run on that platform because it's one that's popular. Mm-hmm. Now, when they get in office, they always do the opposite.
Yeah. Well, then they give you the story about, well, now I've got these intelligence briefings that show me I didn't know before, like this is all necessary. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mean the people whose salaries are paid by this have convinced you somehow that it's necessary? Yeah, exactly. They've shown you evidence that it's necessary? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, I get it. Let's go into this with a little bit of skepticism.
Yeah.
Now, of course, like one of the first things that I said was I was like, you think these people hate us? And she was like, well, more so than not. I was like, why do you think that is? Can you think of a reason why people in the Middle East might hate the United States?
Yeah.
Maybe we should change some of that behavior. Maybe that's the real problem. But even so, I mean, I haven't personally been to Iran as an example, but I've read from a bunch of people who have, who said that they're actually like really well liked, that Americans are really well liked by the general populace.
Yeah.
The government may hate us, and there are certainly people there that hate us.
Yeah.
But since we haven't been dropping bombs in Iran all of this time, that most of the population is actually like beyond tolerant of Americans, actually likes Americans.
Yeah.
Now, you probably find less of that in Iraq.
Yeah, bet.
That's supposedly an ally of ours because we've been dropping bombs there for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So, maybe the problem isn't our freedom.
Right. They don't hate us for our freedom.
Yeah.
Man.
But I understand the point. But to me, again, it's like, well, so what? I mean, if you have a talented person coming here from Iran to study nuclear engineering or something like that, or work in nuclear engineering, let's take it out of the studies, work in nuclear engineering. Now, they could get those skills elsewhere.
Yeah.
They can get those skills in China. They can get those skills in Russia. If you have a talented person coming out of Iran that wants to work in nuclear engineering, wouldn't you rather have them here than...
You're right.
Benefiting Chinese society or programs or Russian society or programs? If you believe that this antagonism really exists between these countries, not just between governments, but between groups of people, then wouldn't you still rather have the talent here than there?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, to me, it's just, I don't... I'd rather have them here. I think it's a benefit to all of us to have talented people here rather than other places.
Yeah.
And so I'm willing to take some risks on some of these things. And the other part of it is like, okay, if an Iranian's been told by their government forever how terrible Americans are and is granted a pass to go to America and work in nuclear engineering to steal secrets or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that it would probably be a lot more likely that they would get here, start living and working in America and being like, hey.
I think I'm going to stay.
Yeah, actually, that's a lot of it. But I was going to go a little lower than that and just say, well, this place, it doesn't seem like what they were telling me.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I hope that we would represent that.
I feel like we do, at least in comparison to other countries.
Mm-hmm. And, then there's the argument, well, the Chinese are restricting the kind of jobs that people can have over there from the United States or what have you. Oh, yeah. Do we want to emulate the Chinese? That's what our plan is?
So our plan is to hurt ourselves more because they're hurting theirself already?
And
that kind of logic never makes sense to me. If the other guy's cutting his leg off, is it time for me to lob mine off too?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, and I don't like the idea at any point, because people were talking about during COVID too, like, oh, well, China did such a good job of managing the COVID crisis there. We should have done things more like China. I don't want to emulate one of the most authoritarian governments in the developed world.
Exactly.
That's not what I want.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't either.
Yeah.
So I don't. But I think the real substance of his discussion was just about American culture prioritizing the wrong things.
Yeah, that was what his tweet was more about.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot to that. I mean, now, you may see this as one of the problems of capitalism, that somebody like Taylor Swift can make more at a single concert than most people make in a year.
Yeah, or their life.
And I don't think that she's particularly talented, honestly. I mean, I don't think she's a talented...
Don't tell my teenage daughter that.
Yeah, well, she doesn't listen to the show.
Probably not.
Not to say that she lacks talent, but I don't think that the talent that she has merits that kind of...
She built a cult following.
But that's it. She's built a personality and a brand that draws people, and there's only one of her.
Yeah, yeah. That's
supply and demand. The supply is one.
Yeah.
And she's been able to generate enough demand to make that work. Now, I in a lot of ways, I think it's ridiculous that she makes more money than a talented nuclear engineer or chemical engineer or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's how capitalism works, is that people get to put their money where they want.
Yeah.
The things that are most valuable to them. The problem is what Vivek was talking about, that people do value a pop singer more than these other things.
Yeah.
And they want to be more like her than they want to be like a very talented nuclear engineer. I mean, there's a whole lot of more people that want to be Taylor Swift than want to be Richard Feynman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a problem of a different kind, but that's a cultural issue.
Yeah. Well, and for me, when it comes to issues like this, it's all about balance as far as I'm concerned. Especially when you're trying to raise your kids, because a lot of what Vivek was talking about, I don't remember the tweet verbatim, but I know that like it was
long.
It was long. Yeah, exactly. But I know he talked a lot about, like the way I'm trying to think of what nationality he is, but
Indian, I think.
Indian. Yeah. The way they raise their kids strictly, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. And, some of that is good. Like you need a certain balance of that, but kids also need the freedom to enjoy Taylor Swift.
Yeah. Well, sure. But I understand the parental desire to drive your kids to want to be Richard Feynman more than Taylor Swift.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with that, but to me, it's just all about balance.
I think that he is pointing out kind of a shortcoming of American culture, though, that that we have a culture that is driving kids to want to be an entertainer rather than somebody who's contributing something more valuable or concrete to society and the development of new things.
It's a
that
problem.
They want to be singers and basketball players and influencers.
Well, the influencer one is the thing, though. Everybody,
and streamers.
Everybody wants to be an influencer.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those guys, influencers and streamers and stuff, that make a lot of money and that are really good at what they do.
But it's the same kind of thing as being a professional athlete, though. There's a very small percentage of the people that are trying to do this that actually succeed at that level.
Well, that have the talent to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's
some of it's luck, too, in that particular case. But
yeah, I mean, it can be. But there's still, like, the supply and demand is off when it comes to that, to go back to economics. There's a lot more people that want to be influencers than people that want to subscribe to an influencer.
Yeah. I watch Twitch from time to time. And there's a whole lot more people that have 100 or fewer people watching them than have 1,000 or more. And it's a very rare case the people that have 10 or 20 or 30,000 people watching.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how I would expect that to go,
But the only people that are really making a living off of this are the ones that have
the massive following.
10,000 plus people watching.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I guess the point is that he's saying that there's a lack of value of education. And I think that on top of a lack of valuing education, there's also just a lack of education. I think that it's also evidence of how public schooling has let us down.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the education we get is garbage anyway, whether it's public school or even in the collegiate venue. Like it's not the quality that it should be in either of those.
Yeah. Well, like everything else, if it's public funded anything, it costs too much and is too low a quality.
Exactly.
So private education is certainly the way to go. But either way, you gotta acknowledge the fact that we're spending a bunch of money for an education system that's failing.
Oh yeah,
that's failing to produce the kind of people who want to do things that the society needs.
Yeah,
even though they're indoctrination programs,
right?
Which makes it a double failure.
Which is a failure on every end.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I don't know. I just think it was an interesting thing that he was pointing out.
He took a lot of heat for that tweet.
And he shouldn't have, I don't think, because it's the same kind of argument that people have been making about, like, that conservatives primarily have been making about the black community for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
that, well, you have a culture that doesn't value education, so you can't complain about, being poor and not succeeding in this world. Okay, well, what Vivek was saying is that, white people aren't a whole lot better.
Yeah, right.
Certainly in comparison to Asians.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, is borne out.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely, it's right there.
So I don't think that he was making such a radical statement. He was just applying it to the people that are usually making that statement about somebody else.
Yeah.
And they didn't like that.
And it turns out they all take too kindly to that.
Yeah. He probably could have presented it in a better way.
Yeah.
But he's not wrong. I mean, I've seen a difference in my life between the people whose parents pushed them to excel, and the people whose parents were more either hands off or just didn't care about that kind of thing, or pushed them into other stuff, pushed them into being the great football player or the great baseball player or whatever instead of succeeding in school.
Yeah.
And the results are noticeable.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So now I went to a magnet school and so forth. I was mostly surrounded by people, at least in later high school and beyond, that were motivated to excel.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of them did.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Anyway, I just think it's. I mean, I think it's an important thing to note, and that, maybe people should pay more attention to that, and that there is, as much as anything, I think it is a failure of the way science is taught.
Yeah.
That's a recurring theme on this show, that science is so fascinating and wonderful, and it's taught in this like rote, boring manner in most places in the country, that it's a collection of facts that you're to memorize or whatever, and not a process of eliminating possibilities and revealing so much about how the world works that is counterintuitive or just generally fascinating. And like, I love science. Yeah. I read a bunch of science on my own and so forth. I find that what we have learned about the fundamental principles of how the universe works is just absolutely fascinating and amazing and exciting.
Yeah.
And there's so much there that could be used by science teachers.
To make it interesting.
Yeah, to get people involved. And like, I mean, so I remember when I was running for office, so what was that, 2018, right?
Sounds right.
Yeah.
Had to be, yeah.
I think so. So that's 8 years ago. So how old was your youngest then? She would have been 7?
Oh, don't ask me questions like that. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Right. So she was with me while we were going knocking door to door, getting signatures or handing flyers out or something. I don't remember.
Yeah.
And she said something about not liking math, and I was like, oh, well, math is fun. And we spent the rest of the time just like bouncing math problems.
Yeah.
And she was loving it.
Yeah.
Like, she was having a good time. Now, 2 years later, she was like, oh, I hate math. But obviously it was something that could be fun for her.
Well, the thing is the math isn't the problem. It's the way it's presented.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you were saying.
And yeah, math, science, these things are the same way. They're not so boring. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, it goes back to our crummy education. It goes back to our crummy education system. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just what it is.
Yeah. So. All right. I guess that's enough of that.
Yeah.
It's just a thing that really stuck out to me.
Yeah.
I thought people were talking about the wrong thing there, because who cares about the visas?
Right.
And he got a lot of heat for something that I think is a reasonable criticism.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll talk about some of Trump's threats next week, because I actually want to spend some time on this libertarian thing. I don't know how long it's going to take, Yeah. I want to talk just real quick though about the Panama Canal.
Okay.
Like some of the claims that he's making are just not correct.
So I said I wanted to go back and listen to that press conference, and I haven't. I did read some stuff on the press conference, but I hadn't actually listened to his words.
Yeah.
So I need to go back and do that. Trump's just entertaining. It'd be a fun thing to listen to.
Well, like he's making the claim that they're charging us more, the Panama's charging us more than other countries to go through the canal. No, there's flat rates based on the size of the ships. If we're getting charged more, it's because our ships are bigger.
And I guarantee you our ships are bigger.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me.
The Chinese don't control the canal. They are paying for port space on either side of it.
Yeah. Well, Trump's not going to take kindly to that, regardless of the particulars.
Yeah. I mean, they claim they don't have any military there. That may or may not be true.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, I mean, he alluded to taking it back through our military, if I'm not mistaken.
Which would be our third, really, but second invasion of Panama.
Yeah.
Because
gotten really good at it.
You know, that territory originally belonged to Colombia.
Okay.
It was part of Colombia.
Okay.
And they were dragging feet on the idea of putting a canal in. They weren't being subservient enough to the United States about building a canal.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how much certainty I can say this with, but the U.S. encouraged, at the very least, some revolutionary groups to throw off the chains of Colombian sovereignty in that territory.
Something we're known for doing.
Yeah, and then the U.S. immediately recognized the great nation of Panama and sent naval resources down there to defend it from the Colombians.
Yeah, exactly. That's a classic American move right there.
And then started building the canal.
Yeah. Yeah. We did this for you. We get our canal now.
Yeah. So, I don't know. We're pretty tied up in the history of Panama anyway.
Yeah.
And we overthrew, of course, Noriega way back when. I'm already going into more detail than I had planned on this podcast. But we overthrew Noriega, who had been an American puppet for most of his career and had started to buck a little bit. And so we couldn't have that.
Yeah, of course not.
And I don't know. It just... we made a deal.
Yeah.
And I think that what Trump's really pushing for is not for us to be treated equally, but for us to get benefits.
Preferential treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, which I'm not necessarily opposed to unless you start talking about using military force to make that happen. That's ridiculous. I think that you can probably make a reasonable negotiation with the Panamanian government.
Yeah.
But then, it belongs to them now. They're free to make negotiations with other governments as well.
Well, and Trump's going to never take the military option off the table, just even if he has no intention of using it, because that's a negotiate. I mean, he's a master negotiator, and that's a tactic.
That's a real threat.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the world knows that that's a real threat.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I like that he has all but taken military action off the table in regards to China and Russia and Iran and North Korea. And, which I think is wonderful. But then he's shifting military threats to Panama and Canada. And Denmark in the form of Greenland.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just so wild. I don't know.
I mean, at least we can win those fights.
Yeah, right.
I
guess, right.
Make that argument at least. See, we can be like the Harlem Globetrotters playing the Generals.
Right.
Yeah, not playing the Lakers.
You don't think the Canadians can take us?
Well, Trudeau stepped down, so they got more chance now.
They got a better chance now than they did, right?
Yeah. Oh my God, that guy.
Yeah.
I don't know how he stayed in office all that time. He was terrible for that country.
Yeah.
I think they'll recognize it eventually, but
what he did to the truckers and the people who support the truckers is absolutely unforgivable. That enough right there beyond all the other things he's done, because he's done plenty.
Yeah.
But the trucker thing is absolutely unforgivable.
Yeah, I agree.
And you would think his people would feel that way.
Yeah, the liberals.
Yeah.
Not if you're on the other side. This is what we've learned about liberalism in the Western Hemisphere at this point. And the modern liberalism in the Western Hemisphere is that you get all the freedom in the world as long as you agree with us.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you don't...
we're going to seize your bank accounts.
Yeah.
Or freeze them or whatever.
Freeze them is what he did. But, yeah. And we hope you starve.
Exactly.
So, you did say you wanted to talk about the future of the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
What did you have in mind? I guess so. This is your proposal. So, what did you?
I mean, I'm curious to kind of see where things are going to go, because the party's in a strange place right now, having at least a large amount of the party endorsing Trump and kind of going along with Trump. It just kind of brings into question is like, and having such an influence like we do is the best use of our time to keep with the Libertarian Party and keep trying to grow it and build it, or for a bunch of us to move to the Republican Party and be the freedom wing of the Republican Party and kind of continue to make the Republican Party better. And I think that there's an argument for both sides of it. I know you have a pretty strong feeling one way.
Yeah.
And I don't have strong feelings either way. But I don't think the idea of a bunch of us, and when I say a bunch of us, I'm really more talking about the Mises people, going to the Republican Party and just being hardcore freedom-loving Republicans. And because the Republican Party is going to have, the reason I think that it's a fair argument that we should attempt that is because once Trump's gone, and he will be gone in 4 years now, like what is going to happen? Like the future of the Republican Party is in flux once he's gone. And I think that there's definitely an argument to be made that our side could have a big influence on the direction that party goes. I don't know.
Over what period of time are we wanting to?
I mean, I think
this?
if we're going to make
talking about the next 4 years,
yeah, I think it has to be done pretty quick here, to start the organization and the influence campaign. The truth is a lot of Trump supporters are sympathetic to libertarians. Like there's some economic stuff that they don't quite have a grasp of, but the other stuff, they're pretty well with us.
Yeah. We got to get them out of the protectionist
But
mindset.
I think it can be done, though, because you think back to the George W. Bush Republican Party, and to have thought that party would move to where Trump is at the time would have been crazy. To think that, they're going to be like anti-war.
Well, that Republican Party hasn't moved.
No, well, but the party has, though. Like there's a faction of the party that's still there.
Yeah, there's people that are now involved that weren't.
Yeah,
because they got behind Trump.
Exactly.
And a lot of them will disappear once Trump's gone.
You may be right.
Okay, so in short, to directly answer your question. No, I think it's a huge mistake for libertarians to move into the Republican Party to try and influence the party internally. I think that that libertarians can have much more influence as a potentially oppositional party than libertarians within the Republican Party.
Well, we did this election. Like, I mean, you're right. Like, yeah. I mean, the Republican or the Libertarian Party, like, and so
the ability to play spoiler is a far more influential position than being a 10% or something like that of the Republican Party. You don't have a lot of influence, but being 3% of the national vote
gives you some
in a primarily two-party system gives you negotiating power against both the left and the right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that the Libertarians can have a much greater influence on the direction of policy in this country by being a potential spoiler and using that leverage to extract concessions from one or both sides.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I mean, it definitely worked out this time. I mean, we'll see what we get from Trump as far as, once he takes office and starts governing and whatnot.
I mean, and another thing, and this is just personal, that I know is that I am not a Republican.
Yeah, and neither am I. Well, and I'm not saying, like, let's say that the Mises folks did jump and go to the Republican Party. We're going to the Republican Party to change it. Like, we're not going there to be Republicans. Like, we're going there to be libertarians and make the Republican Party more libertarian. Like, that's the goal, and it has to be the stated goal when we do it.
I think that you can achieve that more effectively by playing spoiler.
By playing through the Libertarian Party. And I don't necessarily agree
by
with
potentially being the difference between winning and losing an election. I think you have more influence.
More sway. Yeah. And it's tough for me because, like I say, like this go around, and a lot of libertarians feel this way, that like this go around, I just couldn't support the candidate that was out there. So I think that the party was used pretty well the way it was, but a lot of libertarians don't agree with that. And that's kind of the other problem is the Libertarian Party has two very distinct factions now, and it's hard for those two to coexist.
Well, I think that most people
because
that were voting Trump on this election in the Libertarian Party, and I may be wrong about this, but I think that most people that were voting Trump on this election that are libertarians weren't voting for Trump so much because they couldn't get behind Chase, but because they saw Kamala as such a tremendous disaster, or at least the continuation of the Biden administration and the Biden policy regime as being such a huge disaster for the United States. And saw Trump as a way out. And in a close enough election where putting their vote on the Libertarian instead of supporting Trump could result in Kamala winning. And that was just kind of unthinkable.
Yeah, but I think I for my money though, if we had a good, solid, a libertarian candidate, I don't think those folks would have felt that way. With Trump.
Well, no, I mean, I think that it could have gone the other way though too. I think that if the Democrat Party had put like RFKJ or Tulsi up as their candidate, it would have gone the other way. That they would have said, "Oh man, Trump's going to be far more of a disaster than one of these other candidates."
I agree with that.
So I don't think that it was really about Chase at all.
I mean, you may be right.
I mean, I gave my vote to Chase because, well, first off, I'm in a place where my vote doesn't matter one bit. But secondly, like I couldn't get behind either of them. I couldn't get behind Kamala or Trump, and and maybe I would have made a decision one way or the other if I was in a swing state. But I don't think so, actually. I think that I had enough problems with both of those candidates
that you just couldn't.
I would have. I mean, I still kind of wasted my vote by my own definition of like voting for a candidate that I don't really believe in by voting for Chase. And it was a vote based on party politics, which I regret to admit, but it's the truth that I thought, well, okay, especially in this election where my vote in this state isn't going to affect the outcome at all. I'd rather put my vote behind the Libertarian Party candidate and maybe get us enough votes to get ballot access for next time so we don't have to fight for it.
Yeah.
That's really what I was thinking. I was looking into the future.
Well, and there's a lot of folks that were thinking the same way and that were making the argument to me that way. You know, you got to think about the ballot access. You got to think about the future.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, I mean.
And that would have been different in a state like Tennessee, though, too.
Where they already don't have to worry about that kind of thing.
Yeah, where ballot access is easy.
Yeah.
Like, ballot access is hard in Alabama.
Yeah, it is. I know firsthand.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think it's at least a conversation worth having as a party. What we want to do as far as that.
Well, I mean, that's my opinion. On should conservative libertarians enter the Republican Party and try and influence the direction of the Republican Party from within. I think that we're better off. Like I said, I think that we have more influence on policy as a potential spoiler, and I think that our goal in terms of the people that came in there for Trump that are more libertarian leaning, that aren't generally politically active, I think our goal should be to try and siphon them off into the Libertarian Party, not to try and make the Republican Party more libertarian.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of what the Libertarian Party does to do that, I got a very excited cat back there.
Yeah. Well, that's an area we're going to have real problems going forward here too, because there's a lot of folks in the LP that don't want to use this party as leverage against the other two.
Well, that's just silly. That's leaving money on the table.
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. But
what's the plan then?
There's a lot of libertarians that I like and agree with that just don't see it that way. That
what's their plan instead?
They would want to run good, solid candidates and try to win elections.
Well, I want to run good, solid candidates and try and win elections too.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't run a good, solid candidate, you're not much of a spoiler.
Well, there's that. I mean, I can't really make the argument because, like I say, I don't particularly understand it either because I'm so on the other side of using this party to gain some type of, to make some kind of change. And that's the reason, that's the problem I have with the libertarians that were against what we did, what Angela did, is that we have an opportunity, or we used our opportunity to try to make some real political change. And I don't see the downside.
Well, and they're angry because Angela talked to Trump and didn't talk to Biden. But Angela talked to Trump and didn't talk to Biden because Trump would talk to her.
Yeah.
And Biden wouldn't.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like it's just what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that she would have been perfectly happy to try and influence policy decisions in the Biden administration, but they weren't even willing to talk.
Yeah.
Now, I think that there's things, I don't know, if you're running between 1% and 3% of the electorate and you think you're going to win elections,
yeah,
you're just wrong. I mean, it's a pipe dream. It's stupid.
I mean, you're the one who always says that political change happens fast.
Political change does happen fast, but it also happens, it happens more locally.
Yeah.
Like, the way you're going to make changes is not in national elections initially.
Yeah.
Like, the way you make changes is that you start creating ripples at the local level.
Yeah.
That spread.
Yeah.
So that's where the focus should be. Not to say that we shouldn't run national candidates. We absolutely should. We should try and take as much opportunity to talk to the general public as we can.
Yeah. I have always said though, like that's how particularly the presidential campaign should be ran. Like it shouldn't be ran so much as a campaign as more of a speaking tour to try to get our ideas out there in front of people. And that's the reason
it's a marketing tour.
That's exactly. And that's the reason having the right candidates is so important. And the truth is Chase does present pretty well.
Yeah.
Like I will give him that. And if he talked about the right things, I'd feel a little better about it.
Well,
but the other problem though I have with Chase is he didn't take a lot of those opportunities he was given. I mean, there was, I don't know all the particulars, but he was offered podcasts and things that he just didn't accept.
Yeah.
And I think that's I mean, that defeats the whole purpose.
The fact that he never appeared on some of the biggest libertarian podcasts is a real indictment. I mean, because the biggest libertarian podcasts aren't really just preaching to the choir. It's not just libertarians that listen to Tom Woods and Dave Smith and Michael Malice and like some of these people. I don't know if Malice ever invited him, but you know, I guess I don't know that.
Well, Dave Smith did publicly.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know about Woods, but I would imagine if he had asked to be on Woods' podcast, he would have had him on. Now, I'm not going to say it would have been, there might not have been some contentiousness, but I mean, neither of those two, Woods or Dave Smith, I mean, they would have gave him a fairly softball talk.
Yeah, now, they would have given him the opportunity to express himself.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they may have pushed him a little bit, but I don't think that they wouldn't have done it in a derogatory manner.
No.
And they wouldn't be trying to sabotage him. They'd be trying to get concessions.
Well, this is what I think that the Libertarian Party needs to do. The Libertarian Party needs to choose one or two issues. And I hate to say this, but domestic issues.
Yeah.
Like, as big a deal as war is, and as influential as it is on domestic politics, I don't think that people, while the anti-war candidate generally wins the elections, I don't think that's why people are voting for them.
No, well, the argument I would make is that we already have that in our pocket.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's one that people pretty well know about us.
Yeah.
There's no reason, and you're right, it's not the sexiest of issues. Like, we need a couple
Well, you don't need the sexiest of issues either. So you pick one or two domestic issues that the major parties are bad on, which isn't that hard.
It's pretty easy.
And you focus on those issues and all right. So my thoughts on what those two issues should be is monetary policy and the surveillance or security state.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think those are both slam dunks.
Now, neither of those is really the sexiest issue. I guess the surveillance security state could be. But,
it could be, yeah.
But monetary policy isn't. But Ron Paul proved
that it can be done. I was fixing to say like that. The Ron Paul is like the test case for that.
And people understand inflation over the last few years like they've never understood inflation before.
This election would have been the election to have ran that campaign.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, you get some ears.
As for the surveillance state, the police state, security state, whatever you want to call it, the main thing that you have to do there, I think, is explain to people why their thing about, well, I'm not doing anything illegal, so why does it matter?
Yeah.
Is a fallacious argument.
Yeah.
That's the hard part of that particular issue.
Yeah.
But I think that those are the things. Those are the things that we're good on. We've always been good on. They're not contentious within the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's the other thing is that it has to be all presented in a way where you avoid even the intimation that everybody who disagrees is like bad or evil or crazy or stupid, like which is the real, I think, problem that we have with politics right now in this country is that there's this kind of widespread feeling that everybody that's on the other side of any policy debate is a terrible person. Yeah. And the truth, Mises said something like this in Human Action, where like if you treat everybody who disagrees with you like they're like they're evil or something like that, that takes away the most fundamental thing about society, that you kind of have to work together. Yeah. That's the fundamental basis of any society, is that you have to work together. Yeah. And people being wrong does not make them bad.
Yeah, exactly.
But it takes away any chance of resolving a debate, and it takes away any chance of any kind of social cooperation.
Yeah.
And so you have to avoid that. both outside the party and inside the party.
Yeah. Well, inside the party is where my concern is right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess both, but inside the party is a problem. And I think you're right, though. I think if we pick a couple of issues that all libertarians can get behind and run with that, I think that's a winning. I think that's the direction. That's a party I want to be a part of and get behind.
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest, like a big part of the reason, I mean, I've thought a lot about personally jumping ship is just because the division, man. Like we're already such a small percentage here, and we can't even get along with one another. Like,
well, I mean, that's the thing. That's why I think it's important, both in presentations to the general public and within the party, that you explicitly recognize that we're all trying to achieve the same goal, grand goal, not all those little specific things or whatever, but the grand goal of a more prosperous, happy, developed, integrated society.
Yeah.
That's what we want. Everybody, and that we have different ideas of how to get there. And within the party, you just need to recognize that we're all looking for the same thing, that we all want the same thing. And just because we disagree doesn't mean that we should hate each other.
Yeah.
Outside the party, you make that same recognition and then just make it very clear that in the major parties' policies have failed.
Yeah. Yeah.
To achieve that.
Exactly.
And that we have a different way of doing things.
Yeah.
And outside the party, you're focusing on some things that libertarians on the whole largely, like huge percentage of people or agree with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you don't have to worry about that public image of like, you don't have to worry about like talking about abortion or immigration. And I know immigration is a big issue, but immigration is an issue where libertarians have a fairly even split.
Yeah.
Well,
and
there's a good faith argument on both sides.
Yeah, it's an issue that I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. But yeah, it's not an issue we're unified on. And we should focus on issues we're unified on and present that to the public.
Yeah. And make sure that there are issues where the major parties have failed.
Yeah. 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 And surveillance and the Fed are definitely a pair of them that I like.
Yeah. And the big one is obviously monetary policy, because it has had such a huge impact. Like if you just start talking to people about how American monetary policy, well, now after the last few years, most of the public understands that printing a whole bunch of money creates inflation.
Yeah.
And then you just start talking to them about how both parties have done this for so long, and you start comparing the value of the dollar in the 1950s and the dollar now, like how far a dollar would go then, and how if you had savings of a certain amount, even with maybe that's too much math, but I think that it's terms that adults can understand. If you can say, if you put this much money in the bank, if you put enough money to buy a house in the bank in 1956, and you were earning 4% interest on that, that you couldn't buy a quarter of a house today.
No, you couldn't buy a car.
That's how much their monetary policy has inflated away your wealth.
Yeah. I saw a gold commercial a while back that made that same argument. They used if you had won the Price is Right in the 70s versus, if you had just took the money you won from the Price is Right and bought gold in the 70s.
Yeah.
And how much better off you'd be with the gold versus the money.
Well, hell, just 4 or 5 years ago, I bought a bunch of gold, and it's worth twice what it was.
Exactly. And your dollar's worth a lot less.
Yeah.
Over that same period of time.
And just pointing out that like your government, no matter if it's the Republicans or the Democrats in charge, through this monetary policy is impoverishing you.
Yeah. Yeah. Intentionally.
That you start talking about why families have to have two people working.
Yeah.
And still can't get by.
Exactly.
When, long ago, it only required a single income.
Yeah.
Like those kind of things have a real impact on the way economics wins.
Yeah. It's the economy, stupid.
Yeah, and just the oppression of the surveillance security state.
Yeah.
And the threat that it poses to you being able to make your own choices about your life. Yeah. And the limitations that it can, like you can talk about Trudeau.
Yeah, right.
Like go back to that truckers thing. Well, you know, they can do that in the United States, and they have threatened it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, think about some of the threats that they were making about people that didn't get vaccinated.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I think that's the way to go for the Libertarian Party. Now, those might not be the two issues. I think that those are two good ones.
Yeah, but there's plenty of issues that we all are united behind. Mm-hmm. So,
and that's the way that you have an impact, and you start pushing more money into local elections than the national elections. Yeah, because that's where you can have an impact quicker, and wherever you have an impact, whenever you put a libertarian in office somewhere, then you can start pointing to records.
Yeah,
and you can say, look, since this guy was elected to county commission, the wealth of this county has grown by X percent.
Yeah.
Because of the policies that these such and such policies that he's enacted in this time that has reduced the burden on small businesses to form and reduced, et cetera.
Yeah.
And once you start being able to point to results that have had real impacts on people's lives, then it's a whole lot easier to make the case for a wider and wider audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I think.
I'm with you. Like I say, I hope we have a bright future. I hope we can right this ship and get things together as far as the LP is concerned. I guess.
Well, I think that, one of my criticisms of the LP for about half the time that I've been in the LP, which is since like 2015 or something.
Yeah.
And I was going to the national conventions every year, and I kept saying in the early years, like you go there and you see that people think that they're at a party instead of in a party.
Yeah.
And that was my complaint, is that people were there to have their like exclusive little drinking club or whatever, which I like exclusive drinking clubs too. Yeah. But we have a bigger purpose.
Yeah.
And I think that people they like to feel like they were dissidents, and I don't know. And I don't think that part has really changed about the Libertarian Party, but I think that with the rise of the Mises Caucus, that you've seen a lot more people get involved that want to have an actual impact and are looking for ways to do that, and are acting more like they are in a political party than just going to a party.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
And I'm sorry for the old school libertarians that are listening to me say that and thinking, well, that doesn't represent me. Well, maybe it doesn't represent you, but on the whole, that's what I observed long before the Mises Caucus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's on the record. There have been podcasts where I said that before the Mises Caucus even existed.
Yeah.
And I think that, I have some complaints about how the Mises Caucus has done things too, but for the most part, I think that has transformed in a lot of ways the Libertarian Party into being more of a political party that's trying to achieve something.
Well, and that has some influence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, that's we should be celebrating that.
Yeah.
That's just how I feel.
Yep. And so the answer to that isn't to join one of the major parties and try and influence them directly. It's to remain your own thing and use that power to influence.
You make a compelling argument. Now, for the most part, I agree. Like I say, I'll be interested to see how the next couple of years go with the LP.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can, like I say, I want what I want more than anything is is for the party to put up candidates that I can be proud of and that I can like push people towards.
Yeah.
In the past couple of presidential cycles, we just haven't had that. That's just my feeling. But.
And for a reasonable fee, I will happily not volunteer. I will happily
be paid.
Yeah, I will happily offer my services as a policy advisor.
Yeah.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah.
For a reasonable fee.
Reasonable. Always has to be reasonable.
All right. Well, let's wrap up there.
Yeah.
So, is there anything next? Yeah. I feel like there was something coming up in January. What was it?
I don't know, but January is slipping on by.
Yeah. Okay. Probably. No, maybe I'm imagining things. All right. Well, I can't think of any reason that we won't be here next week.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook. You can subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, like and share, comment. You can send me email anytime at michael@thelibertymike.com. That's our website, by the way, thelibertymike.com. It's important to put that in the
takes you somewhere else if you don't.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, thelibertymike.com. And you can find all our stuff there and some other stuff too.
Yep.
And then, tell your friends. That always helps. Those likes, all the interactions make much more of a difference in our reach than I had realized.
Yeah, it does.
So, if you listen to our stuff in any of those places, like, interact.
Yeah.
Comments, likes, those things actually like really go a long way. And we really appreciate it. And because we want other people to hear this. It's too small a crowd.
Yeah.
So keep telling your friends too. I like word of mouth spread.
Yeah.
That's like a virus.
Super spreader event.
Yeah. So, but we'll be back next week when we finally get this right. And in the meantime, try to stay free.
Life short, live free.
Ciao.
Later.